Avid.
What's up? Another episode of Real Perfect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Varenz. It's also known as Ricky Varenz, and a great episode for you today. We have a show that you're going to assume is all about cigars, but it really isn't, and it really is at the same time. It's about a issue that has been dear to my heart of late, because with the government overreach and getting in our personal lives and affecting the way we live our lives, so the way we enjoy our lives, these type of conversations and podcasts have become more and more important to me. Today we have Glynn Loope from the Cigar Rights of America, and we talk about the politics of cigars, premium cigars. We talk about how this isn't just a cigar issue. This is a freedom issue. And I've had people on like Brian Festa recently on a second time. He is one of the founders of We the Patriots USA, which is a organization fighting back against mandatory masks. He also has another one called CT Freedom Alliance, which is a organization fighting back against mandatory vaccines. So these type of issues have become more and more important in today's world, because we're seeing more and more opportunities for the government to overreach and get involved in our personal lives. So even though this is a episode about cigars, it's more about freedoms, and it's about this premium cigar issue being another example of how the government gets involved in your personal life and prevents you from enjoying your life the way you want. And we get more into the details with Glynn during the show. It was a great conversation, super fun guy to talk to, so I hope to have him on again in the near future. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because there you can watch the guests and I actually have the conversation. I have all our video versions of our episodes up there, so anytime the guest calls in using video like Glynn did today, you can visually see Glynn and I have the conversation. Also in the show description of those video episodes, you can see links to all our guests' social media accounts, and also my Patreon page, which if you support me on Patreon, and anybody who has, I dearly appreciate it. I can't thank you guys enough for doing so. But if you support us on Patreon, I let you know upcoming shows, who I'm booking, when I'm booking them, all the behind the scenes information. And in the show description, you'll also see a PayPal link that goes to my personal PayPal account. And it's $20 a shirt. If you want one of these new Ripple Effect Podcast shirts, I will mail them out anywhere in the world. $20. We have small, medium, large, and extra large. So $20. Make sure you write in the notes what size you want, how many, and the address it's going to. I will ship it anywhere in the world for $20. That will cover the shirt and shipping, because I'm not trying to get rich off these shirts. I'm just trying to get more merch out there so people can see that there's a lot of like-minded people out there who are feeling the same way and thinking the same thing. So also the next Union of the Unwanted, which is the Swapcast alternative media researcher hangout thing that we're doing. That'll be on the 31st of August at 7 p.m. We already have some great guests booked for that, so I'm super excited about that. And thanks again, guys. I think that's about it. You follow me on Twitter, RV36, Instagram, RV36. I have a personal Facebook page, which is Ricky Varenz or Ricardo Varenz. If you want to connect with me there, just send me a little message. Let me know you're a fan of the show, and I will have no problem confirming our friend request. Also, we have a Facebook page for the Ripple Effect Podcast. You can like that and subscribe to me. All that stuff, review, rate, all that stuff. All that stuff helps. So if you can't help the show financially by purchasing a shirt or on Patreon, then at least rate the show, review the show, and share the show, which I know a lot of you guys have, and support for the show has been growing and growing and growing. And I can't thank you guys enough. Some of you guys have been with the show forever, which I truly, truly appreciate. And also a lot of new listeners who have come over from the Corbett Report or from Tinfoil Hat Podcast or whatnot, and I truly appreciate it. And I've been getting tons of amazing feedback from guests, just writing me messages. Recently, I got a actual voice message somebody sent me, just letting me know that they appreciate what I'm doing, which is something I hear a lot. But another thing I've been hearing a lot of late is how people love the fact that they're hearing people say the things that they're thinking, that they're not going crazy, that they are looking at this logically and seeing how none of it makes sense, and they are seeing the overreach of government, and they are upset about the mandatory masks and this whatever school situation their kids are in, or whatever it may be. Like, there's people out there who feel the same way, because there's a lot of people who are just going with the herd and not asking these questions and not frustrated and upset like the rest of us. So I think it's reassuring, and it feels good to know that there are people out there who are thinking the same thing, feeling the same thing. So I think we're all supporting each other in that regard. So with that said, guys, enjoy this episode, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace. How are you? Thanks for being with me.
Well, you're probably you are the first non-cigar only discussion or podcast thing I've ever done, I think.
Well, it's funny. I'm a big cigar smoker. I've had, I think the last cigar podcast I did was with Delicia, the Cigar Vixen. I know you're familiar with her.
Of course.
She was on like 4 years ago, and then I did one on bourbon. I like just kind of anything I find interesting, anything I'm into, I like to kind of switch it up and blend everything in, that because I figure if the reason why I'm intrigued with so many different things is because I get bored, and then I want to, and then I get curious about something else, and I get curious about something else. So I figure, the listeners will have kind of a similar reaction. They'll never get sick of one topic, because I'm kind of all over the place. But this topic is something that I've been fascinated with, and obviously it's affected my life and anybody who's into cigars for a long time. And even friends of mine who sell cigars. I have a buddy of mine, Robbie, who has actually been on the show once. He came on as a guest, but he owns a smoke shop, and a lot of his family owns, little cigar convenience stores or whatnot to sell cigars. So a lot of these regulations hit people like him hard. And
Absolutely.
I remember when he was fighting with the town that I live in, Ludlow, Massachusetts. I actually went to the meetings and basically complained and let them know my thoughts on everything, and how ridiculous I think some of these regulations were, and how they didn't make any sense, and how little they understood of the whole culture of cigars in the first place. Because I think that's where some of it comes from, is just the ignorance of understanding who smokes cigars, the community, the whole culture of it.
It's all things tobacco. If it's made out of tobacco, it's bad. They love lumping us all into the exact same box. So we're broadcasting now, right?
Yeah. I like to keep it casual and keep it going. I actually, organizations like this, Cigar Rights of America, and I've had on recently CT Freedom Alliance, which Brian Festa, who also started a new organization called We the Patriots USA, which is fighting the mandatory masks thing. And he's an attorney turned kind of activist. But I love these organizations because you guys are in the front lines. You're getting your hands dirty. You're talking to people. You're doing these things. And I think these topics are really important, because you're seeing it now. It seems like, well, what does a show about cigar regulations and cigar culture have to do with what's current events? Well, it has kind of a lot to do with current events, because you look at what's going on in the world, and a lot of people who are upset, it's because they just want the freedom to live their lives the way they want to, without government intervention and kind of stepping over into our personal lives and affecting us financially, and affecting us just with the right to pursue happiness. And so I think you're seeing it with cigars, you're seeing it with mandatory masks. My wife literally just texted me just before we went on the air, saying that Massachusetts just required flu shots for all students going to school. I mean, it's just, in my opinion, it's completely out of hand. It really is.
Well, I do the radio show for my friend Jimmy Lakey quite frequently. He's out in Denver on Fox Radio and local radio stations out there. And Jimmy's a big libertarian type thinker, and he summed it up best. Today it's cigars, tomorrow it's cheeseburgers.
You're right. You know what? I've had a lot of libertarians on the show, and I've even had people like Dr. Richard Wolff, who's a socialist scholar and historian and Marxist historian, and I've had people on like recently Greg Palast, who is a liberal, investigative journalist, and he's been on Democracy Now! And a bunch of stuff. But then I find myself more and more like, because I don't like to be married to any ideas or join a tribe, because then I feel like people expect you to defend that tribe or agree with that tribe all the time, and I don't like doing that. I like to be open to new ideas and constantly explore and challenge my ideas, but damn, it's hard not to agree with libertarians much of the time.
Well, I think I'm paraphrasing when I say this, but there's the old saying, I think Churchill coined it, but if you're not a liberal by 18, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative by 30, you have no brain. Whether he said it or not, it's a cool phrase. And I don't mean that in a offensive kind of way, but the older you get, the more you think, it's my money, it's my time, it's my body, it's my. And I don't mean that to sound selfish in a societal kind of way, because there are obviously those things that are of a collective nature that are good for society as a whole, i.e., in my opinion, public education, whatnot. My wife and I have this discussion all the time because she works for our surrounding local government. And she says, well, what if socialism comes? I said, do we have a government-only police force? Well, it's socialized. Do you have government-owned libraries only? Well, that means they're socialized. Is it a government purely financed fire department? Well, that's socialized. But it becomes more of a debate when you get into those things that are truly personal choice. And cigars just happen to be in that realm for me personally, and for about 3 million other Americans on an occasional basis. And so you sit there and think of all the things that the United States Food and Drug Administration have to think about today. Does cigars really rise to the top of that list? Let's talk about, if I think there's like between 350 and 450 employees, I think. I might be totally wrong about that. I'll verify that. At the Center for Tobacco Products at the FDA. In this day and age, if there's one, and I do mean this, if there's one government employee thinking about regulating cigars instead of public health in a true macro context, then it's a waste of money. And the Center for Tobacco Products is funded totally by user fees on the industry. And for the cigar industry, that's about $70 million annually. They have over $1 billion budget based upon what they're bringing in from cigarettes and smokeless products. $1 billion. We're a fly in the ointment. I mean, and yet the Department of Justice is spending money to defend the FDA position in court. Millions of dollars of staff time at the federal level are being spent to figure out to complicate ways to produce, market, and enjoy a cigar. And you put that in that context, I know I make my living with this, and I would be having this discussion with you even if I didn't. There's got to be a case study and higher priorities here. And the fact that the Centers for Disease Control has a tobacco section, shut it down and put every dollar of it into addressing COVID or the next pandemic or the next pandemic. If there's $1 at the FDA being spent on tobacco regulation, shift every bloody nickel of it over to the drug approval section, for God's sake. It's a case study in federal higher priorities, and we're simply a microcosm of that debate across the spectrum of the entire federal government.
Well, you're right. I mean, the whole thing about socialism and communism and capitalism and all these isms, they're just philosophies. And a lot of times the people who say they promote these things or agree with these specific philosophies, they might be corrupt and they might use them in corrupt ways. I don't think capitalism or socialism, either of them are at its root evil or meant to do harm or anything like that. I think they're just opinions or philosophies that were basically created by man to figure out, okay, what's the best way to have an economy? What's the best way to have a society? And probably the answer, like in most things, lies somewhere in the middle. Like you said, like I've had conversations with people where they're like, they throw the term out, socialism, and I love history. So one of the things that I understand is that throughout history, especially in the 80s, they've used the term socialism or communism many times to justify taking down governments, to justify, intervention in coups in Guatemala and so many different places in Central and South America. I mean, there's historically we've used these terms to scare people, and they're just isms, and it's like it's no different than a socialist country saying we should help take down the government of the U.S. because of capitalism, and look at all the evil they've done, and look how poor, how much in debt they are, how corporations run everything, and how they control politicians with lobbyists and all this stuff. Like, you can create a boogeyman anywhere, but they're just words, they're just words, they're just philosophies, and a lot of times I'm arguing with, I'm not arguing, but I'm trying to explain to people that, like, hey, you're saying you hate socialism, but like, just like you said, Glenn, you do realize, like, we do have socialist things in our society that I'm pretty sure you're for, like postal service, police officers, our highways in many cases. These are all socialist ideas. I mean, socialism, I mean, to kind of dumb it down and simplify it, I mean, it's society agreeing that we're all going to contribute for this one service, for this one thing. And it doesn't mean everything has to be like that, but it means in some cases we agree that, like, okay, maybe we should all come together for police officers to protect us, keep us safer. That makes sense, So, yeah, I mean, I think nobody, I don't think anybody knows, because there's never been a perfect example. Even like my more extreme libertarian friends who are anarcho-libertarians, or whatever, there's no real example of those type of societies being purely one of these things and not a mixture of them, that you can say, hey, look, here's an example of how it works, or this is an example of how it failed. There's always so many other moving parts, from economies to corruption to it being a mixture of some things. So I think the answer will probably be somewhere in the middle, where it'll be a mixture of things. But people do get caught up in these isms and think that, like, oh, this is completely bad. You get people on the left who blame capitalism for everything. It's like, no, capitalism does some good. It also does some bad. Corporations will find ways to get rid of something that's toxic in a more efficient way, by maybe polluting water or using some filler that could be harmful in some food or whatnot. But it's not always bad. Same thing with socialism isn't always bad in regards to, like, police officers or maybe even paving roads. I mean, we have a family-owned little construction company, and we do some state work. So I know all about government, like, just being reckless with their spending. I mean, sometimes you do projects, you're in the middle of nowhere, and they're spending all this money on, like, building some giant stone wall and repaving the road and putting pretty sidewalks. And I'm like, nobody lives here. Like, what do we, and it's like, and it's taxpayer money, So, yeah. And in regards to the FDA, I completely agree with you. Like, I mean, the FDA is the same one who approves tons of drugs, and then a year later, or maybe sometimes even less than that, you see commercials on TV saying, do you have a loved one who died from this drug? Give us a call.
My absolute favorite one is, I guess it was for Shantax or whatever, one of the anti-smoking nicotine drugs they have. If you have suicidal tendencies, that's my favorite one, because I'm thinking to myself, smoke 1 or 2 cigars a day, maybe every other day. Sometimes I go a week without one. Sometimes I smoke 6 a day. Not once have I ever wanted to kill myself after I had one. Not once. But if I take that drug that the FDA has approved, I may have suicidal tendencies. Seriously?
Well, I've heard you make this point before on an interview, and I think you're absolutely right. Like, an example of people of how cigars aren't addictive, right, is the fact that when you talked about when you're at an event and you're smoking all day, the last thing you want the next day is another cigar. If I'm at a barbecue, which this summer there wasn't a whole bunch of them, but usually if I'm at a barbecue and I'm smoking all day, I smoke a bunch of cigars. I'm the same way. The next day, the last thing I want is a cigar. I'm like, no, I'm good for, I'm not going to have any cigars for the next couple of days. I'm good, because you get your fix, you get your fill, and it's something you're addicted to.
Let's
There's no
not use
such.
the word fix. Let's not use the word
Oh,
fix.
sorry.
Your enjoyment of a cigar every now and then.
Yes. Yeah. No, you're right. But so it is one of the, and another example I use. So I live in New England, and I live in Massachusetts, and in the winter, outside of bars, you'd always see people smoking cigarettes, like trying to get their fix, right? And I remember telling my wife, I remember driving by, and I'd be like, this is a perfect example of how cigars aren't addictive, because you never see a cigar smoker outside just trying to get a couple puffs to go back inside.
Ever.
Never. I'm like, why? Because I'm like, it's about the experience. I don't even like smoking cigars if I'm somewhere near somebody who doesn't like to smell smoke, because
Absolutely.
if I'm bothering them at all, it's ruining my experience. I'm like, I can't enjoy this, because I can't enjoy this if I'm preventing somebody else from enjoying their experience, so
That's something you rarely get out of the cigarette community. I'm not bad mouthing them, but that's an attitude that you really don't experience among serious cigar smokers, the occasional cigar smoker. I've had that experience probably a dozen times where I just said, I don't feel like it's appropriate to light up in here. And then other times you sit there and say, this is a cigar bar. If you don't like it, you can leave.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's actually, and I'm going to give away a lot of my friends know that's like one of my goals is eventually to open a cigar bar, a proper one here in Massachusetts. There's not really any real good ones nearby. Any you can buy cigars, but there's not really a cigar bar where you can hang out. And I want to open. And it's just like, you know what it is? It's like I have some friends of mine that even when I get people together for cigars and whiskey or whatever we're drinking, they'll come anyways. And they come anyways because I remember telling them, like, there's something about sitting down and smoking a cigar and having some whiskey or scotch or whatever you may drink that kind of sparks the deepest of conversations. Like you'll get in deep conversations that you would never get if you're just hanging out at a bar drinking Budweisers. And I have a couple buddies of mine who don't smoke cigars, and they would come hang out, and they're like, dude, you're right. You're like, what is it? And I think it's I have friends who are into hookah, and I think it's very similar in regards to like when you're smoking hookah, it forces everybody to be together. It forces everybody to like you're kind of focused on your senses, which you neglect most of your life and a lot of the day. You're paying attention to smells and tastes, and you're discussing, which cigar you like or what you don't like about this, what you do like about that. It forces you to actually communicate and connect, where like in many cases, like the bar life that, exists in America now, a lot of people just go, they watch the game, or there's really loud music. So you're hanging out with your friends, but you're not really paying attention to each other. You're not engaging. And the thing about, which is one of the reasons why I love podcasting too, is because I think there is a benefit of long form conversation and actually engaging and spending some time just sharing thoughts and talking, and you can figure learn a lot about yourself and people around you just by doing that.
No doubt about it. No doubt. I couldn't have said it better myself, so I'll just shut up.
Well, let's get into, so for people who aren't familiar with the Cigar Rights of America, let's get into actually how you got into cigars in the first place, a little bit of your backstory.
Well, I have been a lifelong political hack. I don't know anything else. I've never done anything else. I'll be 57, I think, next month. No,
I think
October, and I've never done anything else. No, historically with cigars, in 2006, for the first time ever, a local state senator here in Virginia introduced a statewide smoking ban piece of legislation in Virginia. In 10 miles from my back porch from where I am right now, a beautiful locally owned steakhouse. Beautiful. I mean, there's not a Roost Chris in America that could rival the steaks that come out of this place. And they had a bar when you walk in, and cigars were welcomed. Whoops, I messed up on what did I do? Oh, there we go. So anyway, you walked in, and it was a cigar bar before you got into the restaurant. They welcomed it. And I walked in there the first time it opened, and I said, "This is the place to smoke a cigar." I was smoking cigars before that, but this steakhouse was just like, this is holy ground. And it's physically attached to our local 112-year-old cigar shop, literally 112 years old, about right at it. And place has moved twice in the last century, literally. So I go into the humidor and I said, I need a cigar to take into that steakhouse. This is just an amazing moment. And at the same time, this senator introduced the smoking ban bill. And I said, how dare a legislature, any legislature, prevent us from enjoying that? So the local cigar shop knew that I was a lobbyist, and we worked together with other retailers in the state, formed the Cigar Association of Virginia, and for the first time ever had local retail tobacconists going to the legislature to speak against this, building coalitions, determining where the allies were and the like, and the legislation was defeated. And I was doing it strictly as a volunteer because I felt passionately about smoking in that steakhouse. And successfully fought off that 2006, 7, and 8. And in 2008, the association brought in Rocky Patel to help wine and dine the House Republicans at a retreat. We were doing the cigars for it. And after that retreat, Rocky asked me if I would drive him to his event, his sales event at our local shop. I said, sure. So on the way to it, he said, we're starting this thing called Cigar Rights of America. You want to run it? And I said, no. Well, I did. I said, why don't you hire me as a consultant to get it off the ground? He said, no. We want a full-time gig. So make a long story short, we wrestled back and forth. And at the end of 2008, they said to my wife and I, come out to Big Smoke Vegas. And we wrangled for 3 more days out there at the end of that year. And I finally went upstairs to her and I said, how many times in your life do you get to help create something from the ground up nationally that you believe in? So what's the worst that can happen? I'll go back to lobbying. my hodgepodge of clients, which included trucking, manufacturers, education, local governments, and the like. And that was 11 years, 7 months, 8 days, 12 hours, and 14 minutes ago.
Wow, that's pretty precise.
So it's not far from being wrong. It's the 11 years, 7 months part's right. But since that time, it's been over 175 cigar events, over 525 congressional briefings, 26 states, a hodgepodge of state capitals on issues ranging from taxes to smoking bans. And the CRA started actually before I came on board as executive director. They did a 5-city tour to kick things off through the Midwest and New York and Orlando and Chicago, Minneapolis, and Milwaukee. And so as I've become fond of saying in these last several months of podcasts, it's grown literally in a decade from a 5-city tour to a 50-state membership, and galvanizing cigar smokers to be engaged in the political process. Are we where we need to be yet? Absolutely not. Is it great that we were able to put almost a half a million petitions into the United States Congress for a premium cigar exemption from FDA oversight? Absolutely. It was incredible to put 30,000 petitions into the White House when those regulations came out and do it in 3 days. Galvanizing cigar consumers and retailers alike to be engaged in the political process and to go to their state capitals, to meet with their members of Congress, to meet in their local city hall. It's like I told these guys in Virginia in 2006. I said, you're no longer just a tobacconist. Politics is now in your job description. And that's something the other tobacco products of the universe learned a long, long time ago. I've been fond of saying, if we're not going to be the first industry, and we're not going to be the last to claw their way out of economic Armageddon. Just look at the liquor industry and what they endured over time. But the cigar industry learned these political lessons, shall we say, rather late. But it's made a miraculous amount of progress in a relatively short period of time, uh, to the point where I can say that, even though it didn't get all the way through Congress, the fact that in less than 6 years, this industry got an exemption adopted by the United States House of Representatives. And that was a long time coming. It was an amazing feat, if you will, for the entire industry. But that being said, there's a long way to go. But I think we've made tremendous progress in raising. It goes back to the origins of our discussion today, that getting the message across to the bureaucracy and to the political community, meaning the elected officials, that we're different, that we don't deserve to be treated like cigarettes, that we are distinctive in terms of our demographic appeal. We've submitted over 500 pages of analysis to the FDA and used that information with the elected officials, demonstrating clearly. People normally have their first cigar at 27. Our demographic is 30 to 65. Retail tobacconists like L.J. Peretti in Boston are not selling to children. Getting that message across is first and foremost to our mission, but it's ridiculous that we even have to sell that message. You would think it'd be obvious, but the bureaucrats really genuinely don't know that. We've submitted volumes of public health data, clearly demonstrating that we don't have the adverse public health consequences associated with inhalation, addiction, and mortality. Those are that coupled with youth access are the very reasons the Congress passed the Tobacco Control Act in the first place. So getting that message across, I mean, truly from the ground up, in educating bureaucrats through nearly a dozen presentations, going from the end of the Obama administration, actually starting well before that. It's actually started 2010, a year into the first term of Obama, through the last 3.5 years with the Trump administration, consistently having to educate and re-educate, turnover in staff, changes in policy, new political threats as to the truly unique nature of what cigars are all about.
Yeah. The thing is, what's the difference between a cigarette and cigar for people listening?
Well, I'll tell you what, let's make it really easy. That's right, we're on a podcast, but I'm holding up now a carton.
Oh, it'll be on YouTube. People will be able to see it.
Okay, well, I didn't know all that. I have more visual aids out. But here's a carton of cigarettes. Now, everybody knows what that is, and for your YouTube watchers.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that packaging appeals to anybody in particular, but I'm holding up here a cigar box that I really like. It's done by Oscar Valdez. Now, that's art. And I'm holding up a really fancy, looking art, just like Picasso meets cigars, box of cigars. And to think that they want to cover that with a warning label that would be about this size, which is a fairly large warning label. And YouTube, you can see that. That's what a government warning label would look like on a cigar box. But here's the moral of the story. You make 1 trillion cigarettes, literally. You make 1 trillion cigarettes. It's all the same cigarette. It's the same chemical composition, same manufacturing process. Everything's the same. You make 100 cigars. All of them are truly unique because they're handmade, a totally agricultural product based upon nothing but sunshine, water, and time. An totally agrarian product. What we're smoking is what came out of the ground. And the only thing that allows the variation of that is, where did the tobacco come off of that stalk? How long is that tobacco aged? How much water was used in that process? How much sunshine did that tobacco leaf receive during its growing time? And how long does it sit to be aged before it ever goes to a local cigar shop? That's a totally natural process. And the operative terminology here is that there's no chemical manipulation, no nicotine manipulation, which is what caught up with the cigarette industry. So that's the fundamental difference. And the fact that it's only used occasionally, it's almost only used in a celebratory fashion. The average cigar smoker in America is less than 2 cigars a month. A month. It goes back to the earlier comment you made. I mean, what I've said many, many times is go to the trade show and y'all have one in my mouth from 6 in the, not 6, but let's say 8 o'clock in the morning till time you get off of the strip or something at the Vegas strip at 2 in the morning. I'll get home and I don't want to touch one, and as you put it, nobody cuddles up and beside each other when it's 20 degrees outside to enjoy a cigar. It's the infrequency of enjoyment. It's the lack of those addictive qualities to it that make it a truly unique tobacco product. Getting that crossed to a federal bureaucracy, you would think would be a rather simple task, but it is not. When the FDA came out with the final regulations in 2016 on the industry, on the industry in 2016, they did everything humanly possible. Visual aid time again. A pack of cigarettes. Humanly possible to say there's no difference between these two. Literally, I'm not making that up. I'm not being overly dramatic.
Yeah.
The language in that document said there's no difference between a pack of cigarettes and enjoying a cigar. That was the point they really wanted to make, and we've had to battle that premise ever since. And that they and the opposition to us, meaning really the public health lobby, have gone to great pains to try to drive that very misnomer of a message across to the elected members of Congress as well. And we've had to battle that off. So the agency and the public health nonprofit community would love nothing more than to lump us all in as one big, giant, demonized basket of tobacco products. Our task, coupled with our friends at the Premium Cigar Association, the Cigar Association of America, the 3 principal trade groups, is to educate that community to say, this is why we're different. This is why we don't deserve the same treatment. And I think we're making progress on that point, but it shows why in Washington, D.C., that proverbial phrase, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And it's why we consistently have to be engaged in the political process as a community, as professionals, as trade associations, but more so as the consumer community that wants to protect that simple, solemn moment with a cigar. That's all we're asking. Keep government out of the process, keep government out of my life, and stop hindering the ability of these artisans to produce amazing cigars based upon, again, nothing but water, sunshine, and time. So that's the Reader's Digest version of what we confront, and we can get into some of the specifics of things we're doing with the Trump administration here in the closing days of before the election, not knowing what's going to happen on November the 3rd. We're, as I've been fond of saying, our strategy is based upon both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue and a courthouse in between. And literally, the federal courthouse is right between the Capitol and the White House. And we zigzag that Pennsylvania Avenue corridor, seemingly, with our litigation counsel camped out at that courthouse, who I've gotten 3 emails from since this conversation began, literally. And what we're doing in terms of advocacy on Capitol Hill, getting our allies to echo our message to the Trump administration. We did the same thing during the Obama administration. And working the executive branch with different agencies that report directly to the president. We recently delivered to the White House 2 letters. Rumor has it Pennsylvania and Florida are important to the election in November. It's strictly a rumor, but I'm being facetious, obviously. but there are Florida and Pennsylvania represent the economic axis of the cigar industry. Almost half the cigars in America are distributed through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. All of them enter through the port of Miami. And the industry utilizes virtually every port in the state of Florida. Over 70 corporate offices between Fort Lauderdale to Miami, north of Tampa and Naples. That's the economic footprint of this industry. Getting that point across, to both campaigns is critical to our mission as well. Excuse me.
Yeah, no problem.
So basically, other than that, nothing's going on.
Well, it's one thing I want to touch on that you talked about was when we're talking about the cigarettes, the difference between cigarettes and cigars. One thing I try to tell people is that if you eat McDonald's burgers every single day, you're going to be unhealthy and you're going to have probably some health issues caused by that. And it's similar to cigarettes, where like if you eat grass-fed beef, right, every day, and grass-fed, grass-finished, healthy, good organic food, you're not going to be unhealthy. It's actually going to be good for you. Now, cigars, obviously aren't good for you. I would say physically. I think mentally they're good for you. I think that having some type of time to reflect and therapy. I mean, it's similar to what maybe people might get out of meditation or yoga. But in regards to the quality, there's no additives. There's no shit in it. So because there's nothing in it, you have to assume, like I say, like cigars are the expensive ribeye and grass, fed ribeye, and then cigarettes is the cheap McDonald's beef, and meat with fillers and all the other stuff. So what ends up being, I guess, the dilemma or the debate is like, what's actually causing the health issues? Is it the actual tobacco? Is it the actual beef? Or is it the additives, the fillers, and all those preservatives that are contributing to possibly causing some health risks? And that's what I think it is, because most people that I know that smoke cigars, and it's funny because when I had Delicia on, I remember her saying this. She's like, I don't think cigars are unhealthy, because she's like, I'm around people all the time that smoke cigars and nobody has any health issues. And I'm like, it's funny because after that podcast, I actually look for studies to see if there's anything specific to cigar smokers. If you could isolate just cigar smokers and see if cigars alone isolated could add to some health issues. And one thing I was kind of amazed was how little that's been researched and studied. There's not really anything that can specifically prove that a healthy, normal person, if you just add cigars to their lifestyles, all of a sudden they're unhealthy. You don't.
That's right.
Yeah, there's no study that shows that, okay, this person's healthy, this person's fine, he eats, he exercises, he's healthy. Now add sorry, hold on. Now add cigars to a healthy person's lifestyle, and and that alone will cause health issues. Do you know of anything that specifically can prove that shows and has that been one of the debates? Because I guess this will lead to my second part of this question is, what is the biggest purpose for fighting against premium cigars? What is it? Because of the fact that they really do care about the health of people and they're just so ignorant to cigars that they think this is a way of protecting people? Or is there something, maybe more to it?
I think I hate to be overly generalizing that question, but I simply believe it is the war on combustible tobacco. Anything combustible tobacco. And a failure by default of the agency, of the bureaucracy, of the public health community, of having any desire whatsoever to want to differentiate between any given tobacco product. You can debate about the health impact differences between smokeless and cigarettes. And you can debate the public health difference between hookah, cigars, pipe tobacco, cigarettes, and smokeless all day long. You're not going to find many that will agree with. Then there will be those that simply say, you've got to put them all in one basket. And literally, I've got a case study in that. One day we were in a Midwest United States Senator's office who is violently anti-tobacco. And we literally put down a bag of chewing tobacco, a carton of cigarettes, some mass market products, and a $450 box of cigars. And they looked down at the table and said, literally, we don't care. Treat them all the same.
Wow.
And that is truly reflective of the attitude of so many within the anti-tobacco community. It's easier to say, treat them all the same. And that's why we've had to mount this campaign and get retailers engaged at the congressional district level. I've experienced this. I've had members of Congress change their mind. A Midwest rural member of the House of Representatives changed his mind because the single cigar shop that existed in his congressional district picked up the phone and called him and said, I really need you on this. And getting that much, as simple as that sounds, that much political engagement is new to this industry, quite frankly. So, couple that with getting a few thousand cigar smokers in a given congressional district to do the exact same thing. It's the heart of creating any type of grassroots coalition support for your given political position.
You're a busy man.
Well, literally, as we're doing this, a court decision has come down that I have not. I mean, literally, while we've been talking, a court decision's been handed down that I can't read while we're on the air. I've been sending text messages. I'm on a. Just give me a break. So they're all going nuts right now. We've been waiting for 2 weeks or so for a judge's decision in the D.C. Circuit Court, and I think it just got passed down. And I don't know what it is. We'll have to come back and do breaking news with you sometime to figure this out. But let's go back to the part of your question. I muddle through all these distractions. We have submitted in that last 529 pages we submitted to the FDA on July 25th, 2018, which has not been responded to. We submitted information that's been submitted and published by the Centers for Disease Control, by the American Medical Association, by the New England Journal of Medicine, all incredibly credible, not exactly friends of tobacco cause, sources that demonstrate we don't have a statistically significant impact on mortality, inhalation, addiction, or child-youth access. Let them say it. They said it for us. Those pieces of analysis that we submitted have failed to be responded to tell our story for us from the public health perspective. So the fact that, there's no statistically significant, that's their terminology, there's no statistically significant impact on mortality should tell us about everything we need to know about enjoying the occasional premium handmade cigar. And we've already addressed the case studies just between your experiences and mine on the lack of addiction. And that lack of addiction comes through the lack of inhalation. It's biologically impossible to absorb the level of nicotine in a cigar into your bloodstream. Why are we having this discussion, public health community, bureaucrats in Washington, D.C.? Recognize the data, recognize the studies, and we've gone through this exercise twice. And just recently, the FDA proposed going through it a third time. Well, why do you do that? Well, because you don't like the numbers. I mean, when their own data reflects the proven fact that children do not go into premium handmade cigar shops to buy a $5 to $6 to $7 plus product, should tell all of this story that we need to tell. But it doesn't fit their little mold, so we have to consistently do that. And that's why we do what we do.
Yeah, my buddy who owns a smoke shop, that was one of my arguments when they're like, they're banning flavored cigars. And I'm like, I'm like, why aren't you banning flavored vodka? Because you know who drinks that shit? Kids. Kids drink flavored vodka, not adults. Kids. Who drinks, Fireball whiskey? Kids. Like, no kid is spending $15 on a cigar. If they're buying cigars, they're buying the ones that they're going to roll weed into that are, much cheaper. They're not, the kids are not, and there is, I think it's good that you're seeing younger people get into cigars, but, outside of all that, what about just the right to pursue happiness? And as long as you're not affecting somebody else's right to pursue happiness, you should have the right to do that. Why can I go buy enough alcohol where I could kill myself and nobody will ask me a question? Why can I go around every corner? And remember, this is the same government that once told you that marijuana was the most dangerous drug ever, and all of a sudden you can buy it, in every state anywhere, so obviously health, I don't think, is their motive or intentions to protect people, right?
That's exactly right. And it's not the money either. I mean, they're collecting user fees, but that's capped by Congress. I'll tell you, the phone's going nuts this afternoon.
Hopefully, good news.
And we'll find out. um, what the hell was I going to say? All right, go with another question.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. What the hell were we just talking about now? We were
And
just
let the
hitting.
record show, drugs were not involved in our memory lapse. We're too many distractions between the two of us.
But but you're no. I think I was using the example of marijuana. How like the same government that was telling you forever and ever it was the most dangerous drug ever. All of a sudden, and same thing with prohibition. I mean, even if alcohol is toxic, and don't get me wrong, I'm not against alcohol.
Well, that's what we were talking about. You're right, but to me, too much of this debate has not revolved around one theme: enforcement. Enforcement. Believe it or not, the FDA has conducted over 1 million, and I'm not making this up, this is their number. The FDA has conducted over 1 million compliance inspections on places that sell tobacco, convenience stores to premium shops, all the way across the board. Over 1 million since they received regulatory authority over tobacco products. That's 1 million inspections since 2009. A fraction of a fraction of a fraction have been premium cigar shops. But even with that, even with cigarettes and smokeless, even with the convenience store market, even with mass market products, there's been between 94 and 96% compliance rate. Now that's tobacco across the board, compliance. So you've done over 1 million inspections. You occasionally find a cigar, so you say everybody should be subject to the exact same rules and enforcement measures and penalties and the same regulatory basket with a 94 to 96% compliance rate. And our friends at the another organization called National Association of Tobacco Outlets brought to our attention a study that was done by, I think I'm getting this right, but it was like a school association, school board association, something along those lines, that demonstrated that the vast majority of those getting their hands on tobacco products were through what's called social sources. Uncle Jim bought me a cigar. Aunt Nancy bought me a mass-produced tobacco product. Uncle Jim bought me a pack of cigarettes. It wasn't through the retail level to the adolescent. It was coming through an adult buying it for them, which means it's not the retailer's fault of any kids getting their hands on a tobacco product that's illegal under the age of 18 to 21. So you take that and you walk into any cigar shop in America, what are you going to see? Older people enjoying them together. Not even your age or mine, but even older. And I can tell I'm older than you, but even older than me, sitting around enjoying a casual moment with friends in an adult venue. And so this topic of enforcement is not brought up enough in this context, and that the data almost proves that youth access to tobacco through retail channels is virtually a fiction.
What's their end game? Are they just trying to prevent all tobacco from being sold?
Oh, listen, some of these people at the FDA produced, articles decades ago. I'm summarizing this called "Living in a Tobacco-Free World." And you've got international organizations pushing that political agenda, and it's a political agenda, not just a public health agenda, on the abolition of all things tobacco. Well, we learned, the hard way what prohibition means to liquor. People want to enjoy a drink, and prohibition simply didn't work. Well, it's not going to work for anything. If you try to ban cheeseburgers, people are going to get cheeseburgers. If you try to ban salt, trans fat, and sugar, people are going to get salt, trans fat, and sugar.
You just create a black market. That's all you do. You just create it. Yeah.
But Coca-Cola and McDonald's spend a lot more money on politics than cigars.
Well, that's the thing. Where the hell is the government in banning fast food that's been poisoning people, or pesticides, or all these other health issues. I mean, the thing is, put the information out there. If you want to, that's why, when Ron Paul was running, I was a big fan of the way he looked at things, because at least libertarians, they had strong opinions on stuff, and I didn't necessarily agree with them on everything, but their way of resolving things or changing people's minds weren't by getting into your personal life and creating regulations. It was by just informing people. It's like, this is what I think, and they're not for government coming to your personal life and telling you that we're going to protect you. I mean, it's same thing with the mask debate, all these things. I mean, the biggest problem with this, first of all, in most cases, the science isn't settled. There's so many different perspectives on so many different things. Anytime there's some good argument, there's another conflicting, even better argument. So it's just like, if you're not harming anybody and it's a personal decision, why not let people do what they want? Why not let them enjoy life? Like I always say, you can't hit the reset button at the end of this journey. So it's like, while you're here, enjoy it and experience life the way you want to do it. And as long as you're not hurting anybody and you're not harming anybody, because again, that it's a blurry line, and it's a slippery slope, this idea of preventing you from harming yourself, because there's so many things. Prescription drugs kill people. Fast food kills people. I mean, and causes a lot of, and it causes a lot of stress on our hospitals, our healthcare, all this stuff, because people, diabetes is going up, heart disease, cancer. Last year 606,000 people died of cancer. Like, that sounds like something we should be worried about. It's not some people are trying to buy a cigar, and the fact that you're trying to protect kids. And then a lot of, like, for example, my buddy who owns the smoke shop in Ludlow, he got a lease. He's stuck in this lease for a certain amount of time. The only person who works there is him and his cousin. He works there almost 90% of the time, and it's how he makes a living. And he bought this. He basically signed the contract for this lease for this certain amount of time, thinking that if I sell, these products, I can make the money to help pay this lease. All of a sudden, a year later, and then him having this lease, it's like, hey, I know you're in a multi-year lease, but you can't sell these things anymore, these products that help you make a living. And then, by the way, there's a huge corporate gas station down the street that's going to open, that's going to compete with you in regards to the other things that you sell. But good luck, And during one of these meetings, these town hall meetings, he was like, listen, if you guys can get me out of my lease, I don't have any problems with your regulations. But he's like, I'm stuck in my lease, and I can't sell any things to help me pay or to make a profit to help pay for my lease. You guys are just screwing me and leaving me hanging. So his story, there's tons of other stories like that, of just people that you're affecting their lives. And it's sad. And I think, when you really look at it, who are they protecting? Who are they helping? Because like we said, like, the kids aren't the ones smoking it, and if they are smoking it, then it's being purchased by a adult, which is the same way alcohol is purchased. So you can make the same argument about how do underage kids get drunk, right, at parties. It's not because they're buying it most of the time; they're getting it from somebody else. So you don't end up going around punishing every person who sells alcohol. So it's it's obvious that
because it's about the money.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah.
A lot of reasons that, like I said, alcohol and cheeseburgers and soft drinks spend a lot more money on politics than we could ever dream of. And
isn't that the argument for lobbying, right? Like lobbying.
Yeah.
I've had Jack Abramoff on my show, and which I'm sure you're familiar with, and
that.
What that?
Nothing.
Are you friends with him, or
No, I'm not.
Oh, but you're like, I want to stay away from that connection. No, but I had him on after he ended up doing time, and he ended up writing the book. I'm one of those people that I've had Roger Stone on twice, years ago. I've had Jesse Ventura. I don't mind getting somebody on who's controversial, as long as if they have something to offer that I think and some ideas or some philosophies or a book that could promote something that's worth learning, then I'm okay if I disagree with them on other things. And Jack Abramoff, he was on. He has a unique insight on how corrupted the system is, because he was exposing that and using it for his benefit. And after he did some time, he ended up, writing a book and kind of talking about it. So, but it's funny because you hear stories like his, and you see you get this perspective that like all lobbying is bad, right? And I remember even when I had Roger Stone on, one of the times I had him on, we were talking about this. We were kind of debating a little bit about lobbying and if it's good or bad. But and then like my point is of bringing it up, it's like, okay, you look at him and you look like, oh, he's a lobbyist, but he's bad. And then you look at like what you're doing, it's like we need you,
Well,
and you're
I mean,
and you're
lobbying
defending.
is an innate part of the democratic process.
It
And
is.
problem is some incidents give it a bad name. And so let's just, banish. There's been members of Congress and candidates for public office that have publicly advocated to ban lobbyists. Well, that's pretty undemocratic and wouldn't last, 7 minutes in a federal court.
Well, I guess the argument would be, because I see the argument like you said, right? In a way, if money is power, or is I guess your voice, that it kind of resembles your voice, how big your voice is, then the more money you have, the bigger the voice you have, because you can hire more lobbyists and more lobbying power. So I guess I just to be the devil's advocate from the other perspective, people think like, okay, well, you're giving corporations a bigger voice than the average person, but in some cases, like in your case, you're not just helping big corporations, you're helping the whole community. You're helping everybody who enjoys cigars.
Well, and we're not just going up against a coalition of 42 healthcare groups that battle everything we do. We're also going up against, the lobbying and the political agenda of big tobacco and other major corporations and the like. And as even some of them have said over the last several years, we've been punching above our weight for some time. But it's been because of grassroots mobilization. It's been because getting that one shop in Iowa to call their member of Congress. It's been because of, 5,000 people in Montana sending an email to their members of the United States Senate. Elections are being determined by smaller and smaller numbers of people. I mean, Michael Bloomberg is, probably the biggest threat that we've confronted in some time. And I think one time I saw his last election, he won by 6 to 8 votes per precinct. Now, granted, there's over 2,000 precincts in New York City, but it shows that if people are engaged in the political process, they can make a difference. And that's the reason we consistently run petition systems to every state capital in the country and to the United States Congress and to the White House. But all of this is such a new game to the cigar industry. And we spend a fraction of what other special interest groups do. So the biggest thing we've got going for us is an energized, passionate base of people who simply want to enjoy a cigar. And I think that's been the biggest factor in whatever success we've had over the last decade. And I'll give you some breaking news for your show. Apparently, we did have a win in court today. I don't know the specifics, but apparently a federal judge has agreed with us on a major point. So that'll be breaking news for the ripple
Awesome.
effect.
Yeah, and if you join the Cigar Rights of America, then you get updates and all that stuff all the time, which is awesome.
Here within the next 60 minutes, if it's what I think it is. But and I hope your listeners will go and viewers will go to cigarrights.org to join the cause.
Yeah,
and that's the key. And even if you don't join for $25, we'll send you 2 great cigars for doing that. But even if you don't join with a contribution, please go to cigarrights.org and sign up for our free grassroots alerts. It's absolutely free. Put you on our mailing list. You'll get an email every now and then. If you live in, California or Massachusetts, and some bad legislation comes up, or some good legislation might come up, you will immediately be engaged and asked to echo the message to defend this industry. So we hope folks will join that grassroots network of cigar consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, I think the grassroots movement. I named this podcast "The Ripple Effect" because I truly believed in the ripple effect, and I'm sure my listeners are probably sick of me here saying this, but because they've heard it 250 times. But it's we all can make a difference, and you never know what type of impact you can make, and and there's also strength in numbers. If we all gather together and help each other, then you can kind of get things in motion and really create some change. And every great change starts off with somebody and just having a idea, just saying, hey, I want to do something. I don't want to just sit around and do nothing. And the second you think you can't do anything, you've lost. You've already lost, because nothing's going to be done by if you just assume that, like, hey, I can't change things, so let me just accept things the way they are.
That's right.
Especially in politics, because as you know, politicians care much more about public relation and getting votes than they actually care about any real issues. Massachusetts, perfect example. A golf course said, hey, Charlie Baker, this is starting to get ridiculous. We're going to open up, and we're going to tell all our members that on this specific Friday, we're opening up, regardless what the state says, regardless what you say. So what ends up happening, they end up getting interviewed on Fox News. Charlie Baker gets some backlash, and he says, hey, how about I let the golf courses open? It's like, wait, I thought it was about our health, right? Wasn't it supposed to be about? So did you just decide that all of a sudden it's safer now? No, it's because the public actually fought back. And I think that's the point of bringing up that story is because it's an example of how if you actually stand up for something, you in some cases you can create a change and you can do something.
No doubt about it.
So, but I don't want to take up much more of your time, because obviously you have a lot going on.
And I apologize for the distractions.
It's okay. It's okay.
I never do this. Normally I turn everything off, but I think I'm glad I didn't during this particular hour together. But apparently we do have some good news from a federal court in Washington, D.C. I do want to encourage your listeners to stay engaged with what's left of this election season. There's a rumor that the president's into Twitter. It's strictly a rumor. I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard the president's into Twitter. And with that, if you go to cigarrights.org, we have a collection of Twitter messages, and people can pick and choose one they're comfortable with. You don't have to be pro-Trump, anti-Trump. It's about protecting cigars. But send the president one of our recommended messages. Just pick one. Make up your own, but be nice. And ask the administration to back off the regulation of premium handmade cigars. And that's just one, and send the same message to the Biden camp. I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, he can't read or anything, but I'm sure somebody will read it for him.
Now.
I'm trying to be nice. Listen, I'm people who listen to the show know that I pick no teams. I just it's just some things are just obvious, but it is something people should be active. I mean, another thing is, I don't know if you guys are on Parler, or I think it's pronounced Parler, but it's spelled Parler. It's a Twitter competitor, unbiased, completely, just uncensored. You're seeing a lot of people in the libertarian movement and that, those type of people go over there because of censorship on Twitter or whatnot. It'd be great for you guys, though. I don't think you started.
I appreciate the recommendation. We have not, and I've heard about it and have not had a chance to dive into it, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, because there's a lot of like-minded people that you see going there, because it is the people who are tired of the restrictions on YouTube and Twitter and all the social media stuff. Because I mean, I say I'm not biased, but big tech definitely is, and they're definitely trying to influence what people think and what they see and whatnot, and trying to decide for us what truth is, and everything else that doesn't fit into that box should be restricted, because apparently, which goes hand in hand with this whole podcast, and is people shouldn't be telling you that or the government shouldn't be telling you that they know what's better for you than you do. They shouldn't, and that's the big thing. That's why this show, hopefully a lot of people who maybe aren't even into cigars will listen to this and understand why it's important, because all these topics go hand in hand. It's about having personal freedoms and personal, let us have some personal responsibility too.
Absolutely. Well, I hope your listeners will go to cigarrights.org, that they'll send a president a Twitter message. We've also got a petition campaign going there to send a message to Congress to support exemption. We've got 2 bills filed in Congress that call for an exemption. They're both front and center at cigarrights.org. And also, we're getting ready to enter a very precarious state legislative season going into January. And there's going to be a mountain of bills on calling for tax increases to pay for all these COVID-related economic circumstances confronting the country. Tobacco, alcohol, other vices, if you will, are going to be front and center during the state legislative season. So people need to pay attention to that to keep cigars available at a reasonable cost. Smoking bans can be surfacing, so it's the ultimate contradiction. How can you have a tax increase and a smoking ban at the same time? It's another one of those great contradictions in government. But with that, we hope people will simply be engaged in the political process. And I hate to say this, but I do have to go.
No, it's all right. I figured so much by all the rings and emails and stuff but thank you so much, Glynn. I really, really appreciate it. Hopefully we reconnect again sometime in the future, and thank you for all your work. We really appreciate it.
Anytime. If we don't talk before the election, let's do some type of election review after November 3rd.
Yeah, why not? I'd love to.
Always up for another discussion. I enjoyed our talk. Thank you for inviting me.
Hey, thank you. I'll send you the links once it's up and live. I'll send you all the links. Feel free to share it and post it anywhere you would like.
Please do. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Glenn. Take care.